Hello fellow readers and readeresses. On the 24th of July, this channel turned exactly 2 years old, and right around that time it also hit 3,000 subscribers, which are both things that I can barely believe happened and which make me extremely happy. So in order to celebrate these two very memorable occasions, I decided to do the thing that is both most personal and most lazy, and that is to answer your questions. And for that purpose, I asked you to send me your question either as comments under a video or to fill them in a form if you would like to remain anonymous, and in this video, I'm gonna answer said questions. I'm gonna warn you right now, I have absolutely no outline for this video and I haven't really looked at the questions either besides copy-pasting them in a spreadsheet, so this video will likely be very rambly and very long, for which purpose I'm gonna leave timestamps in the video description for your convenience. I would also like to apologize for wearing glasses and all the shadows and glares that's gonna cause, but I have to read through the questions and frankly practicality has to prevail. Now, without further ado, let's get to the questions, starting with the ones that were left as comments under the video and in the order in which they were left. The first question is by William from William's Library, and the question is, what is your taste in music and film? Well, I don't know that I can define those very specifically. When it comes to music, for example, on any given day and any given hour, depending on the situation, I can listen to very different things that have absolutely nothing to do with each other. I very much enjoy classical music. I have a particular soft spot for string instruments and piano and brass. I like classical music, alright? I also very much like metal music and its many different varieties, anything from Bullet for My Valentine to Amorphous to System of a Down to pirate metal, which is a thing. I also like jazz, drum and bass, soul, music from musicals. I'm all over the place. Now, movies. I don't watch that many, and again, my taste is rather eclectic, shall we call it. I can tell you what I don't like, and that is horror movies, because I'm such a tremendous chicken. I can read the most vile, disgusting, disturbing books ever, but I couldn't watch 5 minutes of a horror movie to save my life. I also strangely don't really like superhero movies. I mean, I can watch over 12 hours of the extended versions of the Lord of the Rings trilogy at full attention, uninterrupted, but I couldn't go through 20 minutes of a Marvel movie without spacing out entirely. The next 3 questions are from MH, starting with, what do you do for a living? Well, until last year, I was a director of the quality assurance department in a rather large international tech company, and I had been working in the tech industry by that time for about 10 years. And then last year, I decided to quit in order to focus on studying to become a full-stack web developer, which has been a dream of mine for many years. So I have been on this hiatus since October of last year, but in fact, I am starting work in a financial tech company in just a few days. Question number 3. What's your favorite color? Maybe I'm gonna shock nobody by saying green, because green has been the main color motive through my apartment, but recently I have started noticing myself rather enjoying orange, and I think that's because a lot of people give it a hard time and I like an underdog. And yes, I realize this is completely insane. Question number 4. Your favorite video to film? Oh, this is without a doubt my monthly TBR, because I get to see which books I'm going to read through the next month. I never know what's going to happen. There's a lot of mystery and excitement involved, so I absolutely adore filming it. But I don't really like the setup and editing part of it, because there's a lot of work involved. I have to put things around here. There's footage from 2 different cameras. I have to get up, go pick up books, remove the microphone, put it back on. I have to adjust audio. I have to put things on the screen, explain the rules. It's a lot, but again, absolutely my favorite video to film. Question number 5 is by Prefers to be Anon today, and they ask, how did you make the large maps for your TBR games? Was a massive printer involved? It's impressive and very cool. Well, first of all, thank you very much, Prefers to be Anon today. That was very kind of you to say, but I'm afraid I've been able to successfully deceive you, because what I actually did was I created the map with the exact dimensions of the board in mind, then I ran it through Krita, which is an open source painting program similar to Photoshop but way more simple and again free, which allowed me to split the image in several equal parts with the approximate dimensions of an A4 sheet, and then I printed those on this very basic printer over here, and then I cut any white border that could be left on the sides, and then I glued them all together on the board. And it was a lot of work, but very satisfying, and apparently the result is good enough. Next we have 3 questions by Ash from Written by Ash. If you could time travel to the past, which decade or century would you travel to and why? What a lovely question. If I have to answer instinctively, I'll probably choose the 90s of the 20th century, because who doesn't like to romanticize the years of their childhood, am I right? I mean, I factually know that those times weren't perfect, but I can't help it. I still think about this decade as the best there ever was. But if I have to consider the historical events and times I'm most curious to see, and provided I can also select where I'm gonna end up, I'd probably choose the Roman Empire around the reign of Trajan, which is widely considered to be the best period of the Roman Empire, so 100 AD, I think. Yes, around that time. Oh, the Library of Alexandria. I really want to see that. So what, 200 BC? I really hope I'm not embarrassing myself right now, but let's say 200 BC. And granted, there's no guarantee I'll be allowed to walk in and browse, especially as a woman, but I mean, let's not allow reality to ruin the dream, am I right? Question number 7. What's your favorite quote? Such a cruel question, Ash. Okay, so the first one that comes to mind is by Brandon Sanderson. I'm sure you're all shocked, and that is, life before death, strength before weakness, journey before destination. Those are words from the Stormlight Archive, and truly words to live by, and I can tell you, I have repeated them to myself many a time, and they've helped me get through some very, very difficult times. Then there's also Joe Abercrombie, and I can probably film an entire hour-long video just quoting him. I literally have a spreadsheet with my favorite quotes by him. Let's go through some, shall we? Travel brings wisdom only to the wise. It renders the ignorant more ignorant than ever. Proof is boring. Proof is tiresome. Proof is irrelevance. People would far rather be handed an easy lie than search for the difficult truth, especially if it suits their own purposes. Truly, life is the misery we endure between disappointments. This is one of my favorite ones. You are a hero around these parts. That's what they call you when you kill so many people, the word murderer falls short. You should laugh every moment you live, for you'll find it decidedly difficult afterwards. But that was civilization so far as he could tell. People with nothing better to do, dreaming up ways to make easy things difficult. It's hard to be done a favor by a man you hate. It's hard to hate him so much afterwards. Losing an enemy can be worse than losing a friend if you've had him for long enough. And many, many, many more. Question number 8. Are there some book genre you would like to read more of that you normally do not read? If so, which ones? I don't know, I have diversified my reading slightly recently, and I'm quite satisfied with the range of genre that I read. The ones that I don't read, I don't want to read more of, maybe more classics. Question number 9 is by Jenny T. Your top 3 fantasy series. Ah, what a cruel question, Jenny. Alright, let me be extremely basic here. A Song of Ice and Fire, the Stormlight Archive, the First Law trilogy, in no particular order, and I am aware that I couldn't be more basic if I tried, but I don't care because this is the honest truth. Question number 10 is by Khalid Imran. Why don't you make top favorite books or series or tier ranking kind of videos? These videos help in comparing reading taste. By the way, love your content. Why, thank you, Khaled. That's very nice of you, and that's also a very good question. Truth is, I don't think I've read as many books or as diverse books as a lot of the people who make this type of videos, so every time I would consider it, I'd go back to the thought that I don't have much to offer in this regard. But I guess I realize now that that's a rather narrow-minded way of looking at things, because it never really occurred to me that people might just want to compare. So thank you for that. I think I might do some of those in the near future. Question number 11 is by Jonathan B. Want to learn more about your cats! Exclamation point. I can't remember if you have more than one. I request cat content! Exclamation point. Jonathan always leaves some of the best comments, as you can see. Well, you are indeed correct, Jonathan. I have 2 cats, Storm and Mist, though I never really use their names, I just call them poopy heads. I have my reasons. Storm is a marble Bengal monster, and Mist is a street orphan of no particular breed. Actually, they're named after the Stormlight Archive and the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson. God, I'm so lame. We got them both when they were babies back in 2022, and how I ended up being the one to take care of them is a long story which I'm not gonna get into, but let's just say that I didn't really want to have cats, and somehow they ended up in my custody. And don't get me wrong, it's not that I don't like cats, I get along with animals of any kind, and they're very cute, but I just didn't particularly want to have cats, and I ended up with 2. But again, they're very cute and we get along quite well, despite the fact that sometimes they're a massive pain in the rear, mostly due to the fact that they're both completely insane. Question number 12 is by B. I'm curious, what was your dream job when you were a kid? Like something you really wanted to do? Oh, B, I have a very specific answer for you here. When I was a child, I was obsessed with nature documentaries and encyclopedias, and I had this dream of moving to the African savannah to save the elephants. Now, were the African elephants endangered at the time? No. They are now. I think their population declined with something like over 50% in the early 2000s, and since 2020 or 2021, they're listed as critically endangered, mostly due to ivory poaching and such. But even when they weren't endangered, I still had the dream of moving there and saving them somehow. The next 3 questions are by one of my favorite people around here, Justina. If you could travel anywhere, fictional or in real world, where would you go? Okay, I'm gonna skip the fictional immediately because I tend to read and love books that are set in some of the most terrible places imaginable, so let's not go there. And when it comes to the real world, I really want to visit Iceland and the African savannah and Sahara Desert. And I know it's not a place, but I would really like to take the Trans-Siberian Express all the way to China. Oh, and I want to drive US Route 20 coast to coast all the way through. It's one of my biggest dreams. There are many other places really, but these are the ones that came to mind right away. Question number 14. What book you wish you could read for the first time again? Oof, what a great question. I think I'm gonna go with Anne of Green Gables because it's such a gentle read full of life, and when I read it for the first time back in 2021, it had been the first time in nearly 20 years that I had felt as excited about life as I was back when I was a kid. This is such a fantastic, touching story, and it shows the beauty in nature and in simple life and even in tragedy. I would really, really love to discover it again for the first time. Question number 15. Do you have any books that you can reread a bunch of times and never get sick of them? Yes, I do, and I have. There's Harry Potter. I have read the whole series no less than 5 times, and the last book from the series way more than that. There's Pride and Prejudice, The Stormlight Archive, A Song of Ice and Fire, Sans Famille by Hector Malot. I think the English title of the book is Nobody's Boy, and it's absolutely fantastic. The First Law trilogy, matter of fact, I'm kind of feeling like rereading it right now. There's many. Question number 16 is by Fanona617. You've told that you moved back to Bulgaria some time ago. Where you moved back from and why were you there? And she also adds, I love the scenes you share in your videos and the sunlight in Bulgaria. Thank you, Fanona. That's very kind. So, for about 4 years, starting 2017, I lived in Paris, France, and I moved there for love, which later on proved to be a bit of a mistake, but the country itself is fantastic. I harbor such great memories from there. However, I wanted to be closer to my family, which ultimately made my decision to come back in 2021. Next, we have 5 questions by Carrie Reeds, who's a Bulgarian subscriber of mine, and I am so happy every time I see a comment from her. Question number 17. What are your top 10 favorite fantasy books? I see we're starting with violence. Alright, I'll drop some here that come to mind in no particular order, but consider that this is in no way official and is prone to change. We have The Way of Kings and Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson. I count these as one because they're the first 2 books in the Stormlight Archive. I'm gonna add the entire First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie, the entire Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin, maybe excepting A Feast for Crows, The Return of the King by J.R.R. Tolkien, The Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch, the entire Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows by J.K. Rowling, The Ember Blade by Chris Wooding, Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb, and Malice by John Gwynne. Again, take these with a grain of salt because this is just what came to mind right now. Question number 18. Do you like romantasy? And if yes, what are your favorites? Carrie, I do not. Matter of fact, 9 times out of 10, any sort of romance in a fantasy book kind of ruins it for me. And it's not because I'm not a romantic person, I just don't particularly enjoy reading about the romantic escapades of other people. That said, of the rather modest amount of romantasy books that I've read, I think Radiance by Grace Draven really stands out. Both of the main characters are utterly sensible and respectful towards each other through the entire book. They were both very smart and understanding, and there was no forced drama, which I liked very much. So I feel very comfortable recommending it as a romantasy book, but keep in mind that this is also an adult book, so there are some rather explicit scenes of horizontal romance, if you catch my drift. And that's pretty much all I can think of. Oh, actually, a friend of mine recently recommended me a few, which I am sure she knows I'm never gonna read, but let me drop them here. Okay, so we have Tyrant Soul series by C.L. Wilson and The Winter King by the same author, as well as Fae Isles by Lizette Marshall. This is what I like to call fairy phallus fantasy. Question number 19. How do you like your time doing Booktube so far? I like it pretty well, Carrie. To be honest with you, I didn't think it was gonna go for so long, and I'm still surprised that people actually watch my videos voluntarily. It's a very good feeling, and I get to talk about books, which is fantastic. And considering that my channel is still relatively small, I get the benefit of people being mostly nice. So it's great. Question number 20. Where did you learn English so good? Thank you, Carrie. Actually, mostly from TV. Because when I was a kid back in the 1800s, there really wasn't anywhere you could learn it, especially in the village where I grew up. Matter of fact, back then when you would graduate 4th grade, they would give you a form that you have to fill about the foreign language you would like to study the following year. And the form stated, out of all the languages listed below, pick the one that you want to study, and there was only Russian, because that was the only kind of foreign language teacher they had around. But on Kanal Edvino, and for those of you who are in Bulgarian, this is the main, and at the time the only TV channel we had, there was this show that was 20 minutes long, I think, every other week, that was sponsored by BBC, where 2 young people would teach you a few words in English every now and then. And it had these the most basic cartoons ever drawn. One of them was called Princess Sylvia, and there was this monster that was eating clocks. I think it was called Muzzy. And there was this duke that was very in love with Princess Sylvia and was constantly trying to trap her into a marriage. I remember one of the first phrases I learned from that TV show was "take him away," and so I learned a few things from there. And then watching TV continuously, you start to catch up words. And I also remember borrowing from the library continuously, probably like 17 times, this very old book on English grammar that was falling apart, and it was entirely in English. And the first few times I borrowed it from the library, I didn't understand a single thing. I was just copying all the words from it. And then later on, I managed to catch a few things here and there. I think it took my entire childhood to learn the language, kind of secondhand from here and there. And then later on, when I started working and got the opportunity to actually speak the language and break this fear of not doing it well enough, you kind of start to get a little more comfortable and then pick up things on the way from people. But I guess TV was my biggest teacher. Good times. Question number 21. Recommend underrated book or books you love. See, I always feel very uncomfortable doing that because I'm afraid that I might waste somebody's time by accidentally recommending them a book that either only spoke to me or simply isn't for them. I think you need to recommend different books to the different readers, obviously. But since you asked so kindly, I'm gonna give it a try anyway. So first, I'm gonna recommend the book by Hector Malo that I mentioned earlier, Nobody's Boy. It's translated in Bulgarian and the title is Bez dom. It's one of the first books I remember really loving and rereading in my life, and I think it's very valuable. Next, I'm going to recommend the Rairia Revelation series by Michael J. Sullivan, which is an adult fantasy series, and while it's not necessarily underrated or unpopular, I'm recommending it because I think it has the highest chance to appeal to the most readers because it has a very universally likable narrative. It has fun characters, fun banter between them, the pacing is fast, the plot is interesting, and it's very easy to read. Then I'm going to recommend Frederick Backman as an author in general, and again, not necessarily underrated in any way, shape, or form, but I think his books are very valuable. Red Sister by Mark Lawrence, again, not an underrated one, and at some point it was very popular on Booktube, but I haven't heard anybody talk about it in a long time, and I think it's one of the more original reads you can find when it comes to fantasy. It has a very interesting world setting, it has a very interesting magic system, very interesting characters, and I think the narrative unfolds in a very original way. And then if you're into YA fantasy, I'm always going to recommend the Lunar Chronicles, which are sci-fi-ish retellings of some of the most popular fairy tales. They have, again, very interesting characters, very interesting plot, there's some romance, they're fun. And Vespertine by Margaret Rogerson, it has one of the best female YA characters ever, as well as a very nice supporting cast of characters and very gloomy, very nice atmosphere. The next two questions are by Misa F. If your favorite author came to you and asked you what his next book should be about, what would you answer? Oh, I love this question. I would answer, Mr. Martin, stop asking me stupid questions and finish The Winds of Winter already. Jokes but not really aside, I'd probably ask Brandon Sanderson to write a book about Hoyd's early years, and if you're not familiar, Hoyd is one of the most notorious and mysterious Cosmere characters, and if I could give one more advice, I would ask the author to write it in a more sinister, gloomy tone, because recently I have seen him publish a few books in a more light-hearted style, and to be honest with you, I don't really appreciate it, and I think it takes away from the stories themselves. And again, this is just my unsolicited opinion, but I really like the question. Question number 23. Do you have any favorite character? If yes, then why him/her? I do have favorite characters, many of them. The first of which is gonna be Sandan Glokta from the First Law trilogy. Absolutely adore him. Most recently from The Age of Madness, again by Joe Abercrombie, I absolutely adore Orso, the young one, not the old one. Of course, Dalinar Kholin from the Stormlight Archive. This man, I could not adore him more, I swear. And contrary to the seemingly popular opinion, I also very much like Shallan Davar from the same series. Oh, there's also Vincenza Vintage de Grazon from the Winnowing Flame trilogy. Fantastic character. There are many others, but these are the ones that came to mind right away. And I guess I didn't answer why any of these characters, but what they have in common is that all of them have been through a lot of difficult things. They have grown from that. They are still struggling with a lot of things, and they are very self-aware. So I guess that's why. The next two questions are from another one of my favorite people around here, RSR7014. Question number 24. What are your general thoughts on Patreon, and would you ever consider using it? I have considered it, and I'm not opposed to it for sure, but there are a few things that are stopping me from doing it. The first of which is stupid, but it's the fear that maybe there aren't any people that are interested in it. But that's not even the bigger thing. I think the biggest problem, I would say, is the fact that this is a hobby for me. I have no aspirations to be a professional YouTuber, not that there's absolutely anything wrong with that, but the way that I am set up right now is very comfortable for me because I have no obligation and I can post whenever I want. But if I create a Patreon, there'll be money involved and I will now have an obligation to deliver consistently with a certain quality. At least that's how I'm gonna feel about it, and I don't think I'm very comfortable with that. And I guess the third thing is that I'm not sure what I can offer on Patreon more than what I'm offering here right now. I was considering maybe creating a Discord and inviting people to talk to me there, but honestly, I am terrible with correspondence. Ask my real life friends, it sometimes takes weeks to me to respond to something that's not urgent. I just really hate texting, and I don't think I can keep up with it with more people. And then the other thing I was considering was maybe moving the vlogs from here to Patreon, because I can see that not a lot of people are watching these. They're my least watched videos, and I was thinking if people are really interested in a more personal style of videos with a little more information about my life, I can put it behind a paywall. But I don't feel comfortable doing that because there are some people that have been with me here since the beginning of my channel, and they like watching my vlogs and commenting on them, and I don't feel comfortable asking them for money in order to do that. So to summarize this long-winded tirade, I have considered it. I am definitely not opposed to it, but for the time being, I have no concrete plans, and maybe one day, if this channel grows much bigger, I will actually do something about it. Question number 25. Have you ever considered allowing us to send you books we think you might like? I've heard mixed results on this, obviously not your home address, but a P.O. box, if that's what you use in your country. I'm not very familiar with the postal service outside of America. Honestly, it's never even occurred to me that you might want to do that. Otherwise, yes, we do have P.O. box services here, and it takes almost no time and money to set this up, and I would be eternally grateful to receive a book by the people who follow me here, but I think it's important to consider the fact that I live in Eastern Europe, and most of my audience is from the US, so I worry about delivery costs. That said, I guess it hurts nobody to set up a P.O. box and start listing it in the video description, so I'm gonna do it, and I would be very grateful to receive a book from you, but please, nobody feel obligated to do that. I'm just happy that you're around.